Hello and welcome to St. Edward's University located in Austin, Texas, where both nights of the first Republican primary debate will be held, hosted by Fox News. Our moderators hosting tonight will be Alicia Cune, Raymond Arroyo, and David Osman. Now let's meet the candidates. At center stage, Nebraska Senator Ben Sasse, Florida Senator Rick Scott, Texas Governor Greg Abbott, South Dakota Governor Kristi Noem, former Ambassador to the United Nations Nikki Haley, Arkansas Senator Tom Cotton, Maryland Senator Larry Hogan, former Secretary of Housing and Urban Development Ben Carson, Wyoming Congresswoman Liz Cheney, and former New Jersey Governor Chris Christie. Rules for the debate are the following. You have 1 minute to answer questions. You also have a minute for your opening and closing statements. 30 seconds for a follow-up if the moderators ask for one, 30 seconds for rebuttals, and 30 seconds for responses to a rebuttal. We now go on to opening statements. We go to Governor Chris Christie. Hello, my name is Chris Christie. I was a Republican governor of the blue state of New Jersey for 8 straight years, winning in a landslide on my re-election bid. Right now we have a president who can't hardly articulate a complete sentence when asked the question. Joe Biden has killed jobs, raised our debt, and caused prices to increase, locked the nation down, as well as forced law-abiding citizens to wear a mask. When it has been proven, it does nothing. It is like a chain-link fence keeping a mosquito out of your yard. Nominate me, and I will, in his words, beat Joe Biden like a drum in 2024. Congressman Cheney is next. Our last 3 presidents have done more harm in this country than help. Barack Obama, Joe Biden, and Donald Trump have only divided our country more and more. Well, I'm going to fix that divide and unite our country once again, like former President Ronald Reagan did when he served as president for 8 whole years. Our debt sits over $30 trillion, and Joe Biden is to blame, over a $7 trillion increase. Our prices have inflated over record levels. Unemployment sits at 5%, as well as forcing a vaccine mandate. As president, I will end this inflation crisis, and I will put an end to the vaccine mandate and bring the Republican Party back to prosperity. Secretary Carson is next. I'll be honest, I'm glad to be back on our Republican primary debate stage. Last time I was here, everyone kept saying things that only they did, so I'm going to give that a shot. I'm the only candidate on stage that leads in 2 state primaries, both of which I was the only candidate to poll over 15%. In the states of Alaska, as well as the battleground state of Michigan. I was the only candidate to break 15%, meaning if I'm the nominee and I'm going against Vice President Harris, which I doubt, but it would be a dream come true, I would carry the state of Michigan back to the Republican Party, meaning I'm the best choice to win the nomination. Senator Hogan is next. Hello, my name is Larry Hogan of the deep state of Maryland, even bluer than the state of New Jersey. Hogan pauses to laugh with Christie. I've won 2 statewide races as well as a federal race, and as state President Biden won by over 30 points. I was able to pass conservative legislation with a Congress that had a Democrat supermajority. If that tells you anything, it should tell you that I was the most effective governor in the United States. And now I'm a Republican senator from Maryland. Everyone wrote me off and I proved all the pundits wrong. Recently, I proposed legislation in the Senate that would lower prices abroad in the country, as well as balance the upcoming budget. My name is Larry Hogan, and I ask to be the next Republican nominee for president. Next is Senator Cotton. We need strong leadership in Washington. We don't have that. We have a president who has caused racial division, doesn't respect the Republican Party as fellow Americans, and has gone on record to say that what we fight for is even worse than what the Confederacy has fought for. We are not the Confederate States of America. We are more than that. We are the Republican Party. We are Americans fighting to represent the United States as president. And we need to show Joe Biden that we are also Americans. Next is Ambassador Haley. Everywhere I go, people always mistaken me as a Democrat. Why? It's because I'm a minority, as well as a woman. Democrats assuming someone is also a Democrat just based on luck, that is something called racism. But Democrats always get away with stuff like that. Let's take a look at New York in 2021. Andrew Cuomo killed over 15,000 people, putting COVID patients in nursing homes. Homes where at-risk people live. But what did the media care about? They only cared about his sexual harassment scandal. They did not care about the innocent lives he took. We, as the Republican Party, must end this double standard and hold the Democrats responsible for their crimes. Next is Governor Nome. Right now, we have a president who is not putting America first. He is putting China first, bowing down to Xi and any demands he has. Our trade relations have weakened drastically. We are the laughingstock of the world, and we must change that. I am the only candidate on this stage, or on the second night stage, who did not implement a mask mandate or lockdown in my state. I did not kneel to the media and the Democrat establishment. I fought back, and I will prove that as the Republican nominee. Next is Governor Abbott. I've been the governor of the great state of Texas for over 9 years now. He stopped and lets the crowd applaud loudly. In my 9 years as governor, my people have trusted me more than any other Republican to solve the problems in the state. My response to the power outage in 2020 was applauded by many people, even those on the Democrat side of things. My state trusted me enough to end the statewide mask mandate. I did, however, have some pushback from Democrats, of course, but I still outperformed President Trump by 7 points in the state of Texas, and I'm the only candidate on either stage that can bring Texas back into the solidly Republican column. Senator Scott is next. During my tenure as governor of Florida, I led the state through the largest mass evacuation in history. Everyone ended up being safe in the end. I oversaw a massive decline in unemployment, taxpayer debt, and crime. I focused on job numbers rather than letting the state run on state agencies or making sweeping policy changes. I created over 1.5 million jobs in my first term as governor, more than any other candidate on stage. I expanded school choice in the state of Florida, creating a better educational system. All this proves why I'm the best person to become the next Republican nominee for president. Finally is Senator Sass for his opening statement. Even though I was censored by the Nebraska Republican Party, I am still leading in the Nebraska primary, proving that Nebraska voters trust me even if the party itself doesn't. I am the best person to become the Republican nominee. In 2019, I was one of 6 Republican senators who voted to prevent Trump from shutting down the government. I also voted to fund a border wall along the U.S.-Mexico border. We need to strengthen our immigration policies because President Biden is letting any and everyone walk into this country without any sort of background check or if they are carrying a green card or not, causing COVID infections to skyrocket, continuing this never-ending pandemic. I ask the Republican primary voters when the primaries begin to vote for Ben Sass for the nomination. Alicia Kune asks Senator Cotton for the first question of the night. During one of your past rallies, we asked about race relations and you said, quote, race relations would almost certainly improve if we stopped emphasizing race in our public life. What was that all about? What I meant was that race was being overemphasized way too much in our country. Yes, black Americans are being brutalized by police, some by accident, others on purpose. But blacks are not the only ones being brutalized by police. Whites and Hispanics as well. Democrats are fear-mongering in this country to make Republicans look like we are all a part of the KKK. We are not. And we as the Republican Party need to prove that. A supermajority of black Americans are never going to vote for us no matter what we do. But through proper legislation, we can do that. For years now, we have seen terrorist groups like Black Lives Matter and Antifa destroying our country, burning buildings down to the ground because of fear-mongering caused by the Democrat Party. And yes, those groups are terrorist groups and should be treated as such. Raymond Arroyo asks, Congresswoman Cheney, in the past you have supported bills restricting not only recreational marijuana use, but as well as medical marijuana use. There are currently millions of Americans being jailed for, quote, petty drug charges, end quote. How do you defend this record? Cheney responds, marijuana is a very dangerous drug being brought into this country. People who smoke it get a very short ease, which makes them want to smoke it more and more, which causes addiction. And people who have addiction do dangerous things like armed robbery, which if you look at the facts, that is something done when people have a serious addiction. Look at what marijuana usage does to you. Chronic vomiting that leads you to go to the hospital. Water vapor gets into your lungs and makes it hard to breathe. And may cause lung cancer. Marijuana is very dangerous and does not help fix anything. Governor Christie is called on to respond. Look, I don't disagree that recreational marijuana is a terrible thing, and that it's a gateway drug to other more serious drugs. But where I disagree is her position on medical marijuana. Medical marijuana does so much good. During my tenure in New Jersey, I legalized medical marijuana and crime rates dropped, as well as unemployment. Medical marijuana is good for relieving nausea and vomiting. Can relieve someone of muscle pain and even can help treat appetite loss. Congresswoman Cheney is given the chance to respond. Well, Governor Christie, you did legalize medical marijuana in New Jersey. But do you know what else you did? You made it legal for children to use marijuana as well. Little children, their bodies haven't even developed yet, and you are allowing children to smoke marijuana, which could halt their growth and halt their ability to learn educational material. Governor Christie is called on for one final response. Look, it is clear if you look at the data, children today are more likely to have mental issues than adults, today or any other day. Mental health is a serious issue, and medical marijuana has proven to help not only children, but adults as well, when dealing with mental issues, relieving them of their mental illness. David Osmond asks the next question. Senator Scott, in the past you have been strongly against the use of the death penalty. However, during your tenure as governor, the state of Florida had executed more people than in any other state under any other governor. How do you respond to that? Scott responds, well, to start off, I did introduce and pass legislation in the state of Florida. It was then that the crazy socialist liberal Supreme Court deemed the bill unconstitutional. I also never approved any of those sentences, and as president, I will sign legislation that would end the death penalty, as that is the easy way out for many criminals in the United States. Most violent criminals will ask for the death penalty because they don't want to face the consequences of their actions by sitting in a prison cell for the rest of their life. Ambassador Haley is called on to respond. Well, Senator Scott, it seems you're forgetting why the death penalty is supposed so much in this country. Look, Senator Scott, I hate to be the one to disagree with you. Capital punishment is actually a quick, painless, and humane way to deter criminal activity. Without capital punishment, this has been proven time and time again. Criminals would continue to commit serious, violent crimes in and out of prison. It is also a cost-effective way and doesn't cost taxpayers a dime. Well, Ambassador Haley, it seems you're forgetting why the death penalty is opposed so much in this country. It is the ultimate denial of rights in this country. There is no due process that explains why the death penalty should be used in this country. Out of all the executions performed in the United States, 4% or more have been proven to be innocent, and the families had to deal with the grief that someone in their family was executed and was innocent the whole entire time. Ambassador Haley is given the final chance to respond one final time. To me, Senator Scott, you sound like a Democrat right now. Capital punishment has been in this country since before the beginning of colonization. I'm going to conserve that. Why? Because I am a conservative. Capital punishment has done more good in this country than it has bad, keeping violent criminals off the street and keeping an average family safe. And Alicia Kune asks, Governor Abbott, conservatives all over the country are worried that unborn children will continue to be aborted by leftists. Some of which who support partial birth abortion. What will you do as president to prevent this? In June 2017, as governor of Texas, I signed a law that banned child dismemberment as well as partial birth abortion. A liberal federal judge blocked it, but I successfully appealed the law. In May 2021, I signed another law prohibiting abortions on children where a heartbeat is detected. And according to the American Congress of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, a heartbeat can be heard 6 weeks after conception. Now, just because I'm sitting in a wheelchair doesn't mean I can't stand up for the lives of the unborn. Democrats are afraid of these words, and I'm about to say it. Unborn lives matter as well. Senator Horgan is called on to respond. Look, I am personally against abortion, but over 300,000 women have died giving birth every single year. Over 400,000 women are raped every single year. So abortion should be legal in instances when the mother's life is in danger, when the mother has been raped, and even in cases of incest. Over 80% of Americans believe abortion should happen if the mother's life is in danger, as well as over 60% of people wanting abortions in case of rape or incest. And we shouldn't change the laws on abortion right now. Governor Abbott is given the chance to respond. Senator Hogan, I'm surprised you're on a Republican primary debate stage defending abortion. As governor of Maryland, you signed legislation funding Planned Parenthood, which included abortions in the bill. You've even been described by pro-choice organizations as, quote, mixed choice, end quote. You need to make up your mind. Are you pro-life or are you pro-choice, Senator Hogan? Senator Hogan is given a final chance to respond. Just a minute ago, I just said I was personally against abortions, but I think it should be a state issue. I don't believe the federal government should play a role in this issue. So yes, let's overturn Roe v. Wade and give the power back to the states. Raymond Arroyo asks, Senator Cotton, Democrats want to pass gun control legislation limiting our Second Amendment rights. What will you do as president to prevent this? Senator Cotton responds, As a senator, the NRA has given me an A+ rating, meaning I will defend your Second Amendment rights to bear arms. I will sign an executive order strengthening the Second Amendment and overturning any state and federal law that bars Americans from bearing arms in this country. I will not let those insane communists overtake this country and take away our rights guaranteed by the Bill of Rights created by our great founding fathers. David Osmond asks, Senator Hogan, during President Trump's tenure as president, he advocated and failed to pass a school choice plan. As president, what would you do to help students within the country? Senator Hogan responds, as the governor of Maryland, I signed a law appropriating $15 million for need-based scholarships, allowing low and middle-income students to go to college free of charge. Our children, because of this, are leading more successful lives because they are able to obtain an associate's degree for whatever major they choose. They are also paying half of what they would have in student debt because of spending those 2 years in community college. Secretary Carson is called on to respond. Well, Mr. Senator, I'm sorry, but I live in the state of Maryland, as do you. When you passed that free community college bill, your constituents kept complaining that their taxes were raised shortly after you passed it. Who do you think was going to pay for it? Giving Americans free community college is not a starter for going to private colleges and university. It'll just be like going to high school right now, and it won't prepare you for adulthood. Senator Hogan responds, Ben, I don't know who in Maryland you spoke to, but I didn't raise taxes on the people of Maryland. I reapportioned funding from the current budget that was being used to prevent a tax increase. I'm not calling you a liar. I know better than to do that. You are a very honest man, and I honestly believe you are being misled. Secretary Carson is given a chance for a final response. I'm sorry, Larry, but I honestly believe what you said was false. It was hundreds of people telling me their taxes went up. They were making less money, but either way, giving free college will create financial irresponsibility, which could sadly add to our ever-increasing homeless population. It devalues the worth of an associate's degree. Businesses will increase qualifications for being hired based on education if community college is being given for free. Alicia Kune asks, Senator Hogan, climate is becoming an ever-increasing threat to not only the country, but to the entire world. What will you do as president that would help defeat the climate crisis? Senator Hogan responds, actually, as the governor of Maryland, I signed a law that was beneficial to both the state as well as the environment. I made regulatory changes to phosphorus nutrient pollution. The water in Maryland was being polluted by agricultural runoff with chicken manure, which at the time was being used as fertilizer. By the time I was elected to the Senate, water pollution in the state of Maryland has dropped 30% since I signed that law in 2015. And I even believe we should negotiate a deal with everyone in the G12 summit and create another climate agreement that is beneficial to the planet, essentially a better negotiated Paris climate agreement. Congresswoman Cheney is called on to respond. Senator Hogan, I'm not going to disagree that climate is very important, but we do not need to be tied down to another climate deal that did nothing to help our environment, while we gave millions of dollars to other countries, which is why I have advocated that we abolish the Environmental Protection Agency, as it has done more harm than good. I mean, look at California, who experiences multiple forest fires year after year. What does the EPA do to prevent it? Nothing. Senator Hogan responds, Ms. Cheney, it seems you're missing the big picture. The EPA is working with local, state, and federal partners on the response to the Northern California fires, to identify locations of household hazards, waste, and any other hazardous materials and containers, to ensure safe conditions and remove materials that are unstable, corrosive, or toxic. So no, the EPA is actually doing something with what low budget they have. Cheney is given the chance for a final response. Senator, I'm sorry if I'm having a hard time believing that. If this was the case, wildfires should have decreased by now. Instead, it is only getting worse and worse for Californians. Heck, even droughts are making it hard for the working class to do their job if they work outside in the sun. Abolishing the EPA is the only the best thing to do so the federal government could step in and fix the situation. Raymond Arroyo asks, Senator Sass, China is becoming more and more of a threat to the United States, being accused of cyber attacks, attacking our gas pipelines, and spying on U.S. officials, and much more. What would you do as Commander-in-Chief in regard to China? Senator Sass responds, China for years now has been undermining our national security, which is a major threat to the United States. They have even created COVID in a lab and spread it to the rest of the world. I would appoint a UN ambassador who would take this issue to the United Nations and make China pay for putting us in this never-ending pandemic. China should be held responsible for this. First, we were told it was caused by bats, and then we were told it was created in a Chinese lab. They might have been developing a chemical bioweapon. China is a danger to everyone in this world. David Osman asks, Governor Noam, during your tenure as a member of the House of Representatives, you propose adding an online sales tax. As a conservative, this would be a minor tax increase on something that didn't have a tax before. How do you defend this stance? Governor Noam responds, I never supported an increase in taxes for anything. What I proposed was adding a tax to items online that were being shipped to other countries, and the other countries would pay us for exporting online goods on goods sold online. It would add millions of dollars to our budget per year and gives us an increase of a chance to have an economic surplus, which we haven't done as a country since Bill Clinton was president, and I believe we could do it again and again every single year. Ambassador Haley is called on to respond. Governor Noam, you just misled voters. You pitched to the House Freedom Caucus to add a sales tax to all online goods sold. You even tried to implement this plan as the governor of South Dakota. This is the reason why you barely won such a deep red state such as South Dakota 2 different times. Governor Noam responds. Governor Noam responds, I didn't mislead voters. I told you what my original plan was. Now all those changes that you mentioned were made by state legislature as well as the South Dakota Supreme Court, who deemed part of my original plan as unconstitutional. You are clearly misleading voters about me yourself. Ambassador Haley is given the chance for a final response. There you are again. The South Dakota Supreme Court didn't strike down anything in your bill. They actually strengthened out-of-state online sales. I'll admit, South Dakota benefited greatly from this, but you still increase taxes. That is not what a Republican does. I, as an actual conservative, will never raise taxes on anyone. Alicia Kuhne asks, Senator Sass, you have been very critical of President Trump in the past, who, despite all the criticism, still has over a 90% approval among the Republican Party. What chance do you think you have of obtaining the Republican Party nomination as a never-Trumper? Senator Sass responds, excuse me, I'm sorry. Senator Sass responds, I'm sorry to burst your bubble, but Trumpism, or whatever it is called, will not be the future of this party. He couldn't even beat someone as unelectable as Joe Biden. He caused the Republican Party to lose the states of Arizona and Georgia. This man caused an insurrection at the Capitol building because his ego couldn't handle the fact he lost a winnable election. He started spreading falsities that the election was stolen from him. And Rick Scott, my fellow Republican senator, even voted to object to the certification of the Electoral College. Since Senator Scott's name was invoked, he gets to respond. Specifically, the situation in Pennsylvania was a major concern to me. The actions of the governor, Tom Wolf, and the courts in Pennsylvania pose a serious threat to the integrity of future elections. Tom Wolf, along with the state courts, made a decision to allow votes to be counted that came in after Election Day, even if they did not have a postmark, in defiance of state law. That is absurd and should not be tolerated. Senator Sass responds, Look, Senator Scott, that has been disproven time and time again. Governor Tom Wolf signed legislation that allowed them to do all that. Do I agree with them doing that? No, of course not. But them counting the ballots was still within state law, and Joe Biden rightfully and fairly won the state of Pennsylvania in the 2020 election, a state I can win back in 2024 for the Republican Party. Senator Scott is given the final chance to respond. I highly doubt you will win the nomination. The never-Trump Republican vote is only 10%. And you are not the only candidate in this field who is a never-Trumper. So that 10% is being divided by multiple candidates. And even if you were winning all 10% of the never-Trump vote, you still wouldn't win enough of the vote to secure the nomination. I don't even know if you're still going to be a senator by 2027 or not. Raymond Arroyo asks, Senator Scott, during your time as the Republican Senate Conference Chair, you promised the following. Republicans would flip the New Hampshire Senate seat. It did. Georgia Senate seat would flip. It did. Arizona Senate seat would flip. It did. However, you promised that Nevada would also flip. It didn't. You also claimed that both Illinois and Connecticut Senate seats would be competitive. Neither was. If you couldn't keep your guarantees during a Republican-favorable midterms, can you keep your guarantees as president? Senator Scott responds, They do need to. Because while I served Florida, either that as Governor of Florida, I have voted as a staunch conservative, bring millions of jobs to Florida. We had one of the best economies in the country. Look, everyone can be wrong every once in a while, and I am not exempt from that. We are human. Humans make mistakes. It's natural. Of course, mistakes needed to be taken to heart. I want to apologize to the people of not only Florida, but the entire United States as well. I was wrong, but I still brought the majority back to the Republican Party. Senator Sass is called to respond. Senator Scott, I'm sorry to have to tell you this, but we wouldn't be the majority in the Senate if it wasn't for Senators Hogan and Sununu. Without them, we would not be the majority. Democrats would be. I mean, we lost the Senate seats in Pennsylvania and Florida. You're from Florida, and ever since Charlie Crist beat Mark Rubio in the midterms, your Senate seat has been in danger. Senator Scott responds, Ben, regardless of that, I still brought the majority back. I am the one who convinced Hogan and Sununu to run. Even without Chris Sununu, I know we still would have flipped New Hampshire's Senate seat. And my Florida seat is not in danger. As the Republican nominee, we will keep this Senate seat because I know Floridians will choose the perfect person to replace me, whoever that may be. Since Larry Hogan's name was invoked, he got a chance to respond. Well, sorry to Senator Scott, he never convinced me to run. It was the people of Maryland who made me want to run for Senate. I wanted to continue to help the people of Maryland and decided to do so through the Senate. The people of Maryland apparently felt the same way about me, and they elected me to the Senate when every major news source said I would lose by double digits. David Osmond asks, Governor Christie, as governor of New Jersey, you vetoed over $1 billion from the state's budget, which resulted in a balanced budget, one of the few in the country. Would you be able to do this for the entire United States if elected? Governor Christie responds, "You're damn right I will. New Jersey Democrats hated me with a passion, and for no reason. I had reduced taxes for normal income Americans in the state. I also lowered the state's income tax as well as business taxes. When I did that, small business revenue skyrocketed. New Jersey's budget was balanced, and I will do the same thing. In my first 100 days, I will introduce a plan that will balance the next fiscal year's budget." Alicia Kunai asks, Governor Abbott, as governor of Texas, you were the first major country to make sex work a felony, which many say is stripping away the right to work. What's your response to this? Governor Abbott responds, sex work, pornography, prostitution. It's all immoral. Men and women should not be exposing themselves for payment. They can learn to develop their own skills working at a place where they can keep their clothing on, whether that be in a restaurant, retail, or even delivery. What these people do is sinful and disgraceful. It is the same thing as public indecency, and I wish I could have made a tougher punishment for those in sex work. Raymond Arroyo asks, Senator Scott, you have called for welfare recipients to take monthly drug tests. Can you defend your statement? Senator Scott responds, studies show that people that are on welfare are higher users of drugs than people not on welfare. And the bottom line is this, if they're not using drugs, it's not an issue. We shouldn't be giving taxpayers money to drug addicts who are only going to spend that money on illegal opioids. That only increases the threat of the opioid crisis, and I will implement a 3-strike system. 3 strikes and you're out, stripped of receiving welfare benefits. Ambassador Haley is called on to respond. Senator Scott, what you are proposing has already been deemed unconstitutional by the Court of Appeals. It does not give due process to those who are currently on welfare. I guarantee those on welfare buy a lot more than illegal drugs. There are only 9% of welfare recipients who use drugs, so you're going to force the other 91% to take drug tests when they don't even take drugs? Senator Scott responds, Nikki, me and you both know that due process is given. That welfare money is being given to those recipients by the taxpayers, and I guarantee taxpayers don't want their money spent on illegal drugs. I mean, we all know you are the media's favorite in this race, so of course you would be defending drug users. Ambassador Haley gets a final response. I honestly have no idea what you're insinuating. I'm defending those on welfare who can't make a living doing anything else because they are either elderly or disabled. And sometimes they need to use drugs like medical marijuana, which is not legal in the state of Florida, to calm down or ease their pain. David Osmond asks, Secretary Carson, many have said you are liberal on the issue of racial injustice. What is your stance on the issue? Secretary Carson responds, thank you for choosing me. I didn't think I was going to be able to speak again. He pauses while the crowd laughs at his joke. My stance on racial injustice is simple. Black Americans are being pulled over just because they're black, which is a violation of the 14th Amendment's Due Process Clause. Every police officer should wear a body cam whilst always on duty. This will help dig out abuse and corruption in the force. We need to build inner-city alternatives to prevent crime. We need to stop the politically correct prejudice of black versus white. But defunding the police is not the way to go. Can you imagine the mayhem if all police protection was removed? The 2020 riots would happen 24/7. Now, the system we have is not perfect, but it's the best system we have, well, until I become president. Now, this isn't liberal, it's just common sense, and a lot of people don't know what that is. Congresswoman Cheney is called on to respond. Mr. Secretary, I think you're wrong. To me, it sounds like Excuse me. Sounds like to me you're saying our police department is racist. We need to add more funding to our police department and teach safer yet stricter ways of handling crime. This is how crime goes down and how we can prevent any more riots, like the ones during the summer of 2020 and the January 6th attack. Secretary Carson responds, Miss Cheney, I don't think you heard me correctly. I never said that the police departments were racist. I said that there were officers within the department that are corrupt and will do anything to lock people up they don't like. There was a scenario where an officer grabbed a victim's phone and then deleted the video of him abusing his power. That is the kind of corruption I want out of the country. Congresswoman Cheney has given the final response. Our police of this nation are some of the most humble men and women in this world, and I will not let anyone attempt to defame or defund them. I pledge here tonight that if elected president, I will increase funding to every single police department within the United States and lock down our crime rates. Alicia Kunney asks, Senator Sass, earlier in the night you mentioned that the Nebraska Republican Party censured you over your vote to impeach President Donald Trump over the January 6th attack. Can you give more details as to why that will not affect your campaign? Senator Sass responds, I mentioned this earlier. I am leading in the Nebraska primary. The voters of Nebraska still have faith in me to serve them not only as a member of the Senate, but as president as well. The Nebraska Republican Party is full of corrupt individuals who were bought out by Donald Trump and his administration. They are his puppets, and it is a shame. Trumpism has costed the Republican Party so much electorally. We had a House majority for 18 years. Then, 2 years after Trump became president, we lost the House of Representatives. Arizona hadn't gone blue since 1996, and Georgia hadn't gone blue since 1980. We are losing voters more and more in every election. Trumpism will be the death of the Republican Party. Secretary Carson is called on to respond. Senator, President Trump never bought out anyone. He talked to people, and through talking, he got what he wanted. He appealed to over 70 million Americans, and they all came out to vote for him, allowing him to receive more votes than any other incumbent president ever. We only lost the states of Arizona and Georgia because of Phoenix and Atlanta suburbs trending more to the left of the country. It was a natural thing, and President Trump is not to blame for it. Senator Sass responds, Ben, why are you kissing up to Donald Trump? He caused more damage to black Americans than any other president in history. And you just said that we needed to do more for the black community in this country. It sounds like there is some hypocrisy in those words of yours. Now tell me, how can you defend someone like President Trump? President Trump is a good man. Was the way he said things divisive? Yes, absolutely. But he did a lot of good things for this country before the pandemic hit, and I was there with him the whole way. He is also not responsible for what happened in the summer of 2020. It was the Socialist Democrats and the media spouting nonsense at low-educated individuals who decided they were going to burn down buildings, leaving people homeless and jobless. Raymond Arroyo asks, Governor Noam, on the issue of human trafficking, there is no doubt every single American wants this practice to end. What will you do to ensure human trafficking ends? Governor Noam responds, whoever the president is, they need to be very strict. Human trafficking is the modern-day slavery. It is a disgusting practice performed by thugs and perverts. We need to fund and educate our police departments about what is going on with human trafficking. It mostly happens in between interstate where traffic is hiding the crimes that are being committed. If there is only one thing we can accomplish in our first term, ending human trafficking should be that accomplishment. David Osmond asks, Senator Scott, illegal immigration rates have skyrocketed at an all-time high under the Biden administration. If elected president, what will you do to decrease illegal immigration rates in this country? Senator Scott responds, we as the Republican Party need to be tough on illegal immigration. I'll say it right now, if you're not out of this country by January 20th, 2025, and I'm elected president, I will sign an executive order allowing police officers to check your immigration status through your green card, passport, or any form of identification. But radicals in the Democrat Party, they want to give illegal state tuition, welfare, free stuff, and they aren't even citizens. They are killing our economy and our country's values on top of it. Ambassador Haley has been called on to respond. Senator Scott, once again, I think you're on the wrong side of an issue. Immigrants are good for our country's culture. I propose granting every illegal immigrant amnesty and a pathway to citizenship during my first 24 hours as president. Afterwards, any illegal immigrant who has not been given citizenship will be deported to the country they have been brought from. Scott responds, Nikki, this is exactly what Democrats are wanting. If we give illegal citizenship, they are not going to vote Republican. They're going to vote for Democrats, because they will continue to give them free stuff. That will kill not only the Republican Party, but the United States as we know it, as well. Ambassador Haley has given the final response. Senator Scott, that is absolutely wrong. President Reagan granted amnesty to millions of illegal immigrants while he served as president, and he was still elected in a 49-state landslide, as well as his successor George W. Bush winning in a landslide as well. So no, the fallacy of immigrants are going to vote for Democrats is false. It has been proven time and time again. Alicia Kune asks, Governor Abbott, the state of Texas under your governorship signed a sweeping voting reform bill that changed how voting is practiced in the state. Many Democrats have called this worse than Jim Crow. Is it worse than Jim Crow? Governor Abbott responds, absolutely not. It is nothing similar to the horrific legislation of Jim Crow. We are taking an approach to how the states of Georgia, Ohio, and Florida are counting their votes. The state of Texas will now count mail-in and early voting ballots first, 2 days before the election. We will not accept ballots that are delivered after the counting has begun, even if it is dated beforehand. We have implemented voter ID laws. Election integrity is very important to everyone in the state of Texas. I honestly don't know why Democrats are against this so much. It is baffling to me. We didn't give an advantage to either Republicans or Democrats. This was a common-sense voting reform. Raymond Arroyo asks, Senator Hogan, labor unions within the United States have protested for more rights. If elected president, how would you handle the labor unions? Senator Hogan responds, as governor, I signed legislation that requires businesses to offer 5 days of sick paid leave. Too many workers are being fired from contracting and sickness and missing multiple days of work at a time. During this pandemic, we have seen many times where businesses have fired employees for contracting COVID and then promptly being fired. In my opinion, very unjustly. Millions of Americans have been fired over sickness, and in my administration, I will appoint a Secretary of Labor who shares my values to labor unions. David Osmond asks, Senator Sass, every day more and more Americans are becoming more accepting of gay marriage. However, the vast majority of the Republican Party is very open about marriage being between one man and one woman. What's your stance on the issue? Senator Sass responds, the Obergefell v. Hodges ruling is a disappointment to everyone in America who understands that marriage brings a wife and husband together so their children can have a mom and dad. The Supreme Court once again overstepped its constitutional role by acting as a super legislature and imposing its own definition of marriage on the American people rather than allowing voters to decide in the states. That case is one of the few cases that needs to be overturned ASAP, along with Johnson v. Texas and Roe v. Wade. Senator Scott is called on to respond. The Supreme Court has the second to final ruling on all issues, behind the United States Constitution, of course. We cannot force our Supreme Court to overturn every single court case we disagree with. That destroys any and all credibility of the Supreme Court. Don't get me wrong, I support traditional marriage, but I do not believe in overturning Supreme Court cases. Senator Sass responds, Rick, both of us have spoken about this before. We both agree that we need to implement an amendment to the Constitution that prohibits same-sex marriage. If we allow same-sex marriage, our birth rates will drop drastically, killing us off generation by generation, until we can no longer repopulate. Senator Scott has given the final response. Ben, you are correct. We need to call for a state convention so we can amend the United States Constitution, so we can bar same-sex marriage once and for all. Then we can strengthen traditional marriages. Study shows that children have less mental issues when both a mother and a father are present in their childhood. This is my reasoning behind this amendment. Alicia Kune asks, Governor Noem, in the past you have supported interventionism in foreign affairs. In a party that is becoming more isolationist, do these views compromise your chances at the nomination? Governor Noem responds, absolutely not. Now, I am only in support of intervention in foreign affairs if the lives of citizens are in danger. The United States needs to be the world's leader and protect citizens abroad from dictatorship countries and terrorist organizations. It will make the world safer and show the United States in a better light with other countries. Senator Cotton is called on to respond. Look, Miss Governor, we as the United States cannot under any circumstance continue this Wilsonian practice of interventionism. Every time we intervene in foreign affairs, the country becomes destabilized, meaning we are spending trillions of dollars in foreign aid, and even more terrorist groups are being formed out of hatred of this country. Wilsonianism has done no good and so much harm to the entire world. Governor Noem responds, there are actually a lot of good things when it comes to interventionism. We limit the powers of monopolies not only in the country but the entire world, lowering the powers of corporations over public goods. We reduce both inequality and poverty, meaning people would be able to live more successful lives when not being forced down by their own government. Senator Cotton is given the final response. Look, I can't agree with you. Look at the Middle East. We have over 20 years of being over there, and things have only gotten worse, not better. We are at war with the Taliban over there. The Taliban wouldn't even be a thing if President Bush had assassinated Osama before 9/11 occurred. And he could have, because he was warned months before it happened. Raymond Arroyo asks, Ambassador Haley, while you were a member of the South Carolina House of Representatives, you voted against adding a smoking tax to those who bought cigarettes. This would have both added revenue to the state as well as prevention in smoking within the state of South Carolina. Do you regret voting against this bill? Ambassador Haley responds, No, I do not regret voting against that bill. I'm against raising taxes on Americans, and I mean that. I will never raise taxes under any circumstances. That includes a smoking tax. Yes, I do agree that smoking is a terrible habit that must be broken in our country. But adding a tax is the wrong thing to do. We should actually increase the national smoking age from 21 to 25, with no grandfather clause. Either that or we can make tobacco illegal as it is. But that is a bad idea because a majority of the states make a lot of their revenue through tobacco sales. David Osmond asks, Governor Noem, you have called to defund Medicaid. The impact of such policy would reduce benefits for South Dakotans by 55%. Why would you want to cut over half of your state's Medicaid benefits? Governor Noem responds, the reason why I want to cut Medicaid spending is because we have too many hospitalizations occurring within the country. If we cut Medicaid spending, Americans would save over $2,000 monthly, as well as cut down preventable hospitalizations, as well as a huge cutback to scarce resources that we can't easily replace. People who are on Medicaid can't even afford their own medicine most of the time, even if it is prescribed by their doctor. We need to cut pharma prices so we can allow our citizens to afford the medicine they need. Governor Christie is called on to respond, I think Republicans are insane for wanting to cut Medicaid spending. Medicaid guarantees financial protection for low and average income families. Almost every single medical care expense is covered. This means that those who are on lower income and end up having to go to the hospital for a serious procedure won't be as financially burdened as a result. The fact that you're defending cutting Medicaid benefits for your own state by 55% is just insane to me. Governor Noem responds, I don't need a lecture from someone who went from being one of the most popular governors in the nation to one of the most hated politicians in the country. The people of South Dakota know about my record and still elected me to a second term with over 65% of the vote in the midterms. If you ran for governor again today, you would lose in a landslide. You shut down a bridge for political purposes. You are the definition of a corrupt Washington elite politician. Governor Christie is given a final chance to respond. I'm the farthest thing of an elite politician. My track record shows I've gotten more done as a Republican governor of a blue state than you did as a Republican of a red state. This isn't about our records as governor, it's about Medicaid spending. I guarantee you if you defund Medicaid, you will lose this upcoming election in a landslide. Alicia Kunay asks, Senator Sass, you have staked your issue on repealing the 17th Amendment. This amendment grants the citizens the right to directly elect the senator to represent their states. Why take that right away from them? Senator Sass responds, Look, I am not taking away the citizens' right to vote. The reason I support repealing the 17th Amendment is because most citizens do not know who their state legislatures are. Also, we have way too many corrupt lifelong career politicians, and if we have citizens elect state legislatures that will pledge to vote to replace these corrupt career politicians who have been in the Senate for decades, we can clean out the corruption in Washington. Senator Scott responds, Well, unlike my fellow senator, I actually support the 17th Amendment. Giving the people to choose who goes into the Senate is a right. Just like how they have the right to choose the president and who represents them in their district in the House of Representatives. Taking away their right to choose their senator will not take corruption out of Washington. I guarantee you that much. Senator Sass responds, Senator Scott, I guarantee you we could get senators like Chuck Schumer and Mitch McConnell out of the Senate if our state legislatures were given their responsibility. They will drain the corruption and the power out of Washington. I have belief in the state legislatures in this country. Senator Scott is given the final response. No, Ben, that is not how draining corruption occurs. The state legislatures are more likely to re-elect people like McConnell and Schumer than the voters are. I'm honestly shocked you want to implement a plan like this when right now the Nebraska legislature hates your guts for your vote to convict President Trump for the January 6th attack. Raymond Arroyo asks, Ambassador Haley, as governor, you flip-flopped on the issue of the Confederate flag. First you said you supported it, then you didn't, signing legislation to remove the Confederate flag. Do you think voters will think twice about voting for you after your history of flip-flopping? Ambassador Haley responds, I don't think voters will be disillusioned because of the Confederate flag. I signed legislation because white supremacists have taken over what the true meaning of the flag was meant to be. It is meant to represent service, sacrifice, and heritage, not white supremacy and hatred towards minorities. It is disgusting that anyone could hate someone based on their skin color. It sickens me, and as president, I will make the attempt to educate our younger Americans, definitely not through critical race theory, but through education that show our minorities are just as strong as any other American. Secretary Carson is called on to respond. Miss Haley, I think we need to have a conversation about this issue. I personally believe if someone wants to fly the Confederate flag, they should be able to. Whether it's on government property, private property, in front of a business, or in front of homes. These also go for every other flag that Democrats have created to pander to their audience. These are flags. They are not going to hurt you. They might hurt your feelings, but they are not going to physically hurt you. Ambassador Haley responds, Ben, I'm honestly shocked you want to have a conversation about this. But I disagree. The government should only fly the American flag on government property, and even flags representing our military. The Confederate flag is now being represented by white supremacists. It is no longer representing what it once did, and the government should not promote white supremacy. Secretary Carson has given the final response. Well, I don't believe the flag represents white supremacy. You only think that because the media and the Democrats have put fear into your minds. There are only more people who fly that flag for heritage rather than racism, and I'm not going to be brainwashed out of my beliefs on this issue or any other issue. Alicia Kune asks, Ambassador Haley, you have been considered a strong supporter of Israel. Under President Biden, conflict in Israel has gotten worse. What will you do as president to correct these mistakes under the Biden administration? What has happened with Israel under the Biden administration is shameful. Our relationship with the country has diminished greatly, and as president, I would build back our strong relationship with Israel. I have signed legislation as South Carolina governor that boycotted businesses that put tariffs on Israel for public goods. I would do that again on a nationwide level as president. You have my word on that. Raymond Ario asks, Governor Noem, during the Trump administration, you came out hard against Trump's trade war with China, and a party or a majority supported this policy. How can you defend yourself? Governor Noem responds, during that trade war, South Dakota and many other agriculture-heavy states suffered because of that policy. Farmers were not getting paid as much, and that was hurting our economy, more than it was helping. I stand up for the people of South Dakota for what is right, and going into a trade war that hurts our economy and our farmers is not what is best for America. It does not put America first. It puts your own ego first above the people of the United States. Senator Cotton is called on to respond. Look, that trade war with China, if President Trump didn't do what he did, we would still be China's you-know-what, something I'm not allowed to say on TV. He pauses while the crowd laughs at his joke. Governor Noem, local job growth skyrocketed under President Trump's trade policy. It protected new industries, reduced the economic gap between the United States and China. It also enhanced our national security. So the claim that the trade war did no harm to good is asinine. Governor Noem responds, do you know what else happened during that trade war, Mr. Senator? Prices on local goods skyrocketed, which hurt our economy even more. There were fewer goods coming into our country, which made small businesses who were getting stock from overseas having to close down due to the lack of goods to sell, meaning they were not making enough money to stay afloat. It was a major economic loss for this country. Senator Cotton gets a final response. President Trump generated more revenue in trade than any other president in history, so don't tell me this trade war was an economic loss for the country. There will be no president who did more for our country's economy than Donald Trump. I will fight to keep the policies of Donald Trump alive. David Osmond asks, Governor Abbott, the state of Texas has one of the highest homeless populations in the United States. Why hasn't that changed during your tenure as governor? Governor Abbott responds, I actually have dealt with our high homeless population. I have signed legislation that would put the homeless in centers where we find them a job so they can save money and maybe be able to get their own home in the state of Texas. I've made it law that homeless people who are camping out to be sent to these shelters to be taken care of properly. I am proud of the work I've done in the state of Texas to take care of our ever-decreasing homeless population. Governor Noem is called on to respond. Normally, I'd congratulate you, but the homeless population increased by over 2% in this state from the year before. You sued the Austin City Council for repealing their 20-year ban on homeless people camping. How is that helping the homeless community? You're not doing anything to help the homeless community in your state. In fact, you're actually making it a lot worse. Governor Abbott responds, I did this because the homeless community are in danger if they are just camping out in the open. They could be mugged, injured, or killed. Which is not a good way in handling our homeless community, and the projections for the next year are set to show that homeless population has decreased in size. Governor Noem has given the final response. With all due respect, Mr. Governor, the projections I've seen shows the homeless in the state of Texas will only continue to become worse issue for you. In South Dakota, I've actually used state funds to quell our already small homeless population, and the homeless have thrived in the state of South Dakota, something you can't seem to get a hand on. Alicia Kune asks, Ambassador Haley, in the past you have criticized President Trump, saying you believe the party made a mistake nominating him in 2016 and 2020. Said of him, quote, I will not stop until we fight a man that chooses not to disavow the KKK. That is not a part of our party. That's not who we want as our president. We will not allow that in our country, end quote. You also said you were not a big fan of him. What has changed now? Ambassador Haley responds, well, I think the best part about being an American is that we have the right to change our view on the issues. At first, I wasn't all keen on President Trump, but the more I spoke with him and worked under him, the more I understood why so many Americans loved him so much, and why the media hated his guts so much. Does he have his moments? Absolutely. But President Trump was an excellent president, but I would do a couple things differently than he did during his time as president. I wouldn't have enacted a trade war with our allies, and I wouldn't have refused funding to Democrat cities. Raymond Arroyo asks, Congresswoman Cheney, in the past you have supported torture techniques such as waterboarding. Why is this policy a benefit to the United States? Congresswoman Cheney responds, our military and intelligence agencies should never show signs of weakness. Once we start showing weakness, our enemies will take us over. We cannot have another situation like Vietnam. We showed weakness and we ended up losing that war. We need to strengthen our military so we never lose another war again. We are the world's leader and cannot afford a place like Russia or China to take over. David Osmond asks, Senator Cotton, what is your plan to help students with overwhelming student debt load? Senator Cotton responds, well, actually, there was a provision in the bill containing Obamacare that actually made student debt rates increase. It's a federal government monopoly on the student lending businesses. We must repeal that revision as quickly as possible, then student loan forgiveness will be easier. I'm not saying to forgive all student debt, but we need to make it easier for all the money to be paid back as quickly as possible, and I am the best person to do that job. Senator Hogan was called on to respond. We need to think about how to solve this the correct way. Getting rid of a provision of Obamacare, that's not going to help. If we were going to have the Department of Education help pay for it, we would need to increase the budget 24 times what it is right now. There is over $1 trillion in student debt that needs to be paid for. In Maryland, I signed legislation out of our education department that split $9 million among everyone in Maryland who still has debt to pay off, and we paid it off without the state going into debt. Senator Cotton responds, Senator Hogan, you're sounding like a socialist right now. They want to forgive student loan forgiveness. That would put us neck deep in debt. To me, that is exactly what it is you are proposing. So far in this debate, you're not sounding like a Republican. If we increase education funding, that'll only make the federal government have a stronger hold on our children's education. Senator Hogan gets a final response. It is not socialism. You can increase spending without either going into debt or raising taxes on low and average income families. I'm proposing an increase to education spending from $68 billion to $80 billion. Then out of that, we spend $100 million of that budget paying off as much student as we can. Then we rinse and repeat. And every time we increase education spending, we increase debt payment spending. Alicia Cooney asks, Senator Hogan, you have taken a very left-wing approach on the issue of energy and oil. Can you defend this position? You can call it left-wing if you want. To me, it is just common sense. You can use renewable energy resources without losing jobs or raising taxes. We need clean energy and we need to create green jobs. We need to combat greenhouse gas emissions, and we need to pass My Clean Car Act, which would invest in electric cars, as well as charging stations for said vehicles. This will not cost us trillions of dollars like AOC's Green New Deal. It will not cost us millions of jobs and shatter our economy either. Secretary Carson is called to respond. Mr. Senator, it seemed like you answered the question about energy and on oil and gave us an answer about the environment. Under the Trump administration, we established the energy independence policies, and afterwards gas prices plummeted. And we also signed a bill protecting the state of Alaska's wildlife, which is good for the environment. So, Senator Hogan, I'd like to know, and I'm sure everyone else would also like to know, did you support those policies? Senator Hogan responds, "Look, I was surprised as anyone when President Trump signed a piece of legislation regarding the environment, but it didn't do enough. I don't know when it will be too late to do anything about the environment, but we shouldn't wait to find out. I introduced legislation in the Senate, and I've been given bipartisan support from 3 Republican senators and 7 Democrat senators co-sponsoring the Clean Car Act, and I urge the Senate as well as the House to vote to pass this legislation." Secretary Carson has given a final response. Well, it doesn't seem as if we're going to get an answer to that question. But I think it is a good thing you're getting bipartisan support for your bill, and I wish you the best of luck on getting it passed. But there is one slight problem with that bill. We do not know how much it is going to cost. I've heard it could cost up to $6 trillion. I have no idea where we're going to get that sort of money. Raymond Arroyo asks, Senator Scott, during your campaign you have called to defund the Department of Transportation, decreasing its budget from $72 billion to $45 billion. Why is this decrease necessary? Senator Scott responds, if my plan to decrease funding for the Transportation Department is successful, we will have $27 billion to spend in other more needed departments, such as defense, health, education, the VA. In 2021, we spent over $3 trillion in infrastructure. I think it's time the Transportation Department's budget take an increase until we need it again. And as of right now, we really don't need that department. David Osmond asks, Senator Sass, if there is need for a government reform, what will you do as president to reform the government? Senator Sass responds, here's what I would do to reform government during my tenure as president. I will push back and sign executive orders overturning any overly strict and dumb regulations. We need to reduce the influence of lobbyists in Congress from both parties. And yes, Governor Christie, that involves you. I'm optimistic about our country's future. Just not Washington. I have pledged not to serve more than 2 terms in the Senate, and when I'm president, I'll call for a state convention so we can amend the Constitution to limit senators to 2 terms and members of the House to 6 terms, with no grandfather clause included. Alicia Cooney asks, Secretary Carson, what is your plan for the youth of our country? Secretary Carson responds, I'm glad I'm getting another chance to speak, but I am deeply concerned about the future of our children. Now, I don't know if creating a department to handle those issues of our youth would work or not. I do know that we need to educate our legislatures on the issues our youth is facing. Mental illness, disease such as COVID, worries of not becoming independent from their parents. We need to teach our youth to be able to handle the real world. In high school, you are not giving a single class that teaches you how to do your taxes, how to apply for a job, how to make a loan, nothing. We need to change that, so the next generation has it better than the last generation. Raymond Arroyo asks, Governor Noam, over the last 4 years, the country has been subject to multiple riots over racial injustice. Will these rioters face prosecution under your Department of Justice? Governor Noam responds, what those people have done disgusts me. They have burned down buildings, leaving our citizens both homeless and jobless, as well as during this pandemic. None of them have been masked or socially distanced, and I guarantee none of those people vote Republican. Hell yes, I'm going to appoint an Attorney General. As of right now, I'm thinking of either Daniel Cameron of Kentucky or Matt Gaetz of Florida, who will fight with me to put these criminals behind bars and pay for their crimes. David Osmond asks, Senator Cotton, during your campaign you have called to buy the country of Greenland. Is this purchase necessary for the country, and is it worth the purchase? Senator Cotton responds, absolutely. Right now, according to the Washington Post, it has an average cost of the country at $42.6 billion. I have offered the country of Denmark $50 billion for the country. I would also give the country immediate statehood. If we buy Greenland, the island is full of mineral wealth, which according to my campaign's own math is worth over $500 million. It is a pro to us on a military level. We could set multiple air and sea military bases there just so other countries can't get a jump on us on the ever-growing technology. Alicia Kone asks, Ambassador Haley, you have supported voter ID laws in the past. Democrats call these policies racist. Are these policies racist? Ambassador Haley responds, "It is not a racist policy. It is a policy that prevents legitimate fraud, and if you look at the data, a majority of Americans support voter ID laws. And no one is being suppressed by needing an ID. It is very easy to get an ID. You need an ID to drive. It's called a driver's license. You need an ID to get a job. You need an ID to buy cigarettes or alcohol. There are hundreds of things in this country you need an ID for if you want to do those things. It is the law." Raymond Arroyo asks, "Senator Sass, one final question before we get to closing statements. You've called for Social Security reform. Can you explain why this is needed?" Senator Sass responds, "Look, we need to privatize Social Security in some form. Of course, exempting older Americans. I also think millionaires and billionaires should be kept off Social Security. Donald Trump even agrees it doesn't do anything for him. We also need entitlement reform. This will lessen the effect of generational theft in this country. We also need to strengthen our ways of giving Social Security. If someone suffers from identity theft, they could end up losing all that Social Security money." Governor Christie is called on to make his closing statement. "Earlier, Senator Sass invoked my name and I wasn't given a chance to respond. That's fine, because I know the people of the United States sees through the bias of the moderators for this debate. I will continue to fight for every single American, and I sure as hell ain't going anywhere. I will be on the main Republican debate stage in July. As the Republican governor of the blue state of New Jersey, I balanced budgets, cut taxes, and increased Medicaid spending. I did all this with a Democrat legislature. I can do all of this again, this time as the President of the United States." Congresswoman Cheney, "I am the candidate on stage that invokes Reaganism more so than any other candidate. I will bring economic prosperity back, end this pandemic once and for all, secure our border, and strengthen our military. I ask for every single one of your votes this coming primary cycle." Secretary Carson, "I'm sad that I haven't been able to speak as much as some of the other candidates on stage, but I'm grateful for the time I did speak. And I hope I influenced the night enough to win over some more voters. As a former doctor, I feel as if I know what needs to happen with this pandemic. Influence our citizens to get the vaccine, then end all mask mandates and lockdowns. They are not doing anything for our country. The virus will go away naturally. It has a 99% survival rate. I guarantee the vast majority of Americans will be fine." Senator Hogan, "If you want to win back the Rust Belt, Georgia, and Arizona, as well as New Hampshire, Maine, and yes, even Maryland, I'm your guy. I've proven to be very popular among independents, especially in battleground states. My internal polls have me beating every single Democrat in every single one of those battleground states I have mentioned. My administration will be that similar to Ronald Reagan, and I will even choose some of the people on this stage with me to serve in my administration. I hope I have earned your vote tonight. Thank you." Senator Cotton, "If you're wanting a fighter like President Trump was, I am your candidate. Tonight I have proven I am willing to fight for what I believe in. As a senator, I have fought for isolationist policies, strong immigration policies, as well as policies regarding balancing the budget. I did not vote to overturn the results of the Electoral College. I am one of the most electable candidates up here regarding the suburbs. In 2020, I didn't even have a serious candidate from Democrats. Democrats are scared that I'll become the nominee." Ambassador Haley, "I was the first woman to become the governor of South Carolina. I was also the UN ambassador under the Trump administration. I was so successful in my roles that for 3 straight presidential elections, I was a top contender to become the Republican vice presidential nominee. As president, I will fight for the people of the United States, here on U.S. soil as well as abroad the entire world." Governor Noem, "I am one of the most effective governors in the country, lowering our homeless population, balancing the budget, protecting farmers, and cutting taxes. As president, I will put the country first and end the corrupt Washington elite's control over legislation, and change the fact that the rest of the world is laughing at us because of the policies of this current administration that is killing American jobs as well as ruining foreign relations with other countries." Governor Abbott, "Even if I am stuck in this wheelchair, I am still a fighter. I will fight for the needs of this country. Texas, under my leadership, was one of the first states to end the statewide mask mandate, and our COVID cases had a minor decrease afterwards. President Biden has done so much harm to this country, and Governor Noem is correct. Other countries are laughing at us. We are divided, and that must end. We need unity in this country, or we will no longer be the United States of America." Senator Scott, "We are currently in a national emergency. The border is flooded. The media has used COVID propaganda to strike fear into average Americans. Riots have occurred all over the country. Our foreign relationships have suffered greatly, and if you look at my record as Florida governor, you will see that. During the emergencies during hurricane season, I was effective in making sure everyone was safe, and I was praised by both Republicans and Democrats for it. Nominate me and you will see Democrats shake in their boots when I force them to tell us why everything got worse under the Biden administration. Finally, Senator Sass, Trumpism will kill the Republican Party. We lost the states of Arizona and Georgia because Donald Trump wanted to disillusion traditional Republican voters. After he lost the 2020 election, he spouted nonsense about how the election was stolen from him, not offering up any sort of proof in doing so. This led his Nimrod supporters to storm the Capitol building. Yes, I voted to impeach Donald Trump, and I am damn proud of it. I would not change my values for anyone in this country. Thank you guys so much for watching. Go follow my Twitter at Chaotic Politics. There is a new poll in the description. You can also go fill out last episode's poll. Leave a review of the debate in the comments below. Reviews will be shown in the next episode. This is the Chaotic One saying, peace.